Mr. President, I rise to talk today about judges, specifically the district court judges across our country. We have a number of judges in Pennsylvania who have not moved forward, and I wanted to speak to that today. I think it's a case of or a story about obstruction. It's as simple as that, and there's no excuse for this kind of obstruction. These nominees came from senators of both parties, and that applies to Pennsylvania as well, and have had all their credentials vetted and approved by the Judiciary Committee. Pennsylvania currently has 4 nominees to the district court, and one seat on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals is vacant as well. All of these excellent nominees deserve immediate consideration and confirmation. The Pennsylvania judges were agreed to by my colleague from Pennsylvania, Senator Toomey. We worked together to arrive at a consensus. Just by way of example, the 2 that we're talking about today in particular are Judge Susan Baxter and Judge Marilyn Horan, Pennsylvania judges who have sterling qualifications and credentials, selected on a bipartisan basis, as I mentioned, in our state, unanimously approved by the Senate Judiciary Committee, and have been languishing now for months, even after Judiciary Committee consideration. We have 2 other Pennsylvania District Court nominees, Judge John Coville and Judge Milton Young, John Milton Young, who are still inexplicably stuck in the Judiciary Committee, despite being equally qualified and nominated the same day as Judge Baxter and Judge Horan. So the old expression applies here: justice delayed is justice denied. And that's what we're seeing when we have this kind of obstruction preventing the confirmation of judges who have come through the Judiciary Committee. The American people have some fundamental basic rights here. One of those rights, I believe, is the right to expect that their courts are working with a full complement of judges. President Obama has seen just 17 judges confirmed in the last 2 years of his presidency so far. I know we're still in the midst of those 2 years, but 17 judges to date in the last 18 months roughly, compared to 68 when Democrats controlled the Senate the last 2 years of President Bush's administration. We've seen the same obstruction at all levels of the court system. We know that, for example, the Chief Judge of the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, Judge Merrick Garland, has in fact been completely obstructed, not even getting a hearing, not even getting a vote of any kind. That might be the most glaring and egregious example of obstruction. So I'd hope our Republican colleagues would when it comes to Judge Garland and his consideration to be a member of the Supreme Court, I hope our Republican colleagues would simply do their job. That's what the Constitution tells us we must do. The Constitution says advise and consent, not advise and consent when you feel like it or when it's politically expedient. One last point about the judiciary, in terms of how essential it is to our democracy, is that we pride ourselves as a nation having a judiciary which is independent, separate from the legislative branch, separate from the executive branch, an independent and in fact co-equal branch of government, not an institution that is the instrument of one party, especially the party in power. So we simply ask, when it comes to Judge Garland, for Republican senators to do their job, allow a hearing, conduct the hearing, ask a lot of questions, and then to have a vote on Judge Garland to be a justice. And on the district court nominees, it's as simple as agreeing to what has already been agreed to, that all these candidates are of the highest caliber, that they're through the Judiciary Committee. All we need now is for folks here in the Senate to come together and make a collective decision to move these district court judges forward. Mr. President, I rise today to ask for unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations: calendar number 307, calendar number 357, calendar number 358, calendar number 359, calendar number 362, calendar number 363, calendar number 364, calendar number 459, calendar number 460, calendar number 461, calendar number 508, that the Senate proceed to vote without intervening action or debate on the nominations in the order listed, that the motions to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate, that no further motions be made in order to the nominations, that any related statements be printed in the record, and that the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object, Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Mr. President, as I pointed out to the floor, the number of vacancies has increased during this term from 43 to 79. We have judicial emergencies in our state and many states around the nation. So I'm going to try a smaller number and see whether we could get agreement on that. And I would ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nominations: calendar 307, Zinnis; calendar number 357, Martinotti; calendar number 358, Rossiter; calendar number 359, Stanton. That the Senate proceed to vote without intervening action or debate on the nominations in the order listed, that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table with no intervening action or debate, that no further motions be in order to the nominations, that any related statements be printed in the record, the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Is there objection?
Mr. President, reserving the right to object.
Objections heard. Senator from Delaware.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to executive session to consider the following nomination: calendar number 307, Paula Zinnis, nominee to the District of Maryland. That the Senate proceed to vote without intervening action or debate on the nominations. The motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate. That no further motions be in order to the nomination. That any related statements be printed in the record. That the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action. The Senate then resume legislative session.
Is there objection?
Object.
Majority Leader. Objections heard.